That's really why I wanted to take the break. Okay. Okay, so we have a few reports to approve. The first is the award of RFP for sanitary and storm sewer main video inspection utilizing zoom lens, closed circuit television camera. Do I have a mover? Councillor Beath, Councillor Hanmer. Okay, any questions, comments? Okay, I'll call the vote. Great, all in favor? Yep, sorry, great, thanks, all in favor, everyone. Okay, award of tender, West Side Employment Lands. Mover, Councillor. Councillor Vodley's going to move it. You can second it, Mayor Jaworski. Any questions? All in favor? Everyone? All right, and the next is the heritage permit application for 157 Albert Street. Mover, Councillor Veith. Seconder, Councillor Freeman. Any questions? All in favor? It's everyone. And then we have the 2019 annual sidewalk report to be received as information. Yes, Councillor Freeman.
So a lot of this report deals with infill sidewalks in my ward. I won't put you on the spot, Chris, but I will tell you that I find it fascinating, the willingness on behalf of some people to say there's no pedestrians in that space and why would we spend the money? Well, there's a reason why there's no pedestrians in space, okay? Because it's a pedestrian hostile space. And so, we don't know whether or not pedestrians want to use this space until we get this right. So I'm happy to move motion to receive the report, and I think it's the right thing to do to get these infills in those places, especially given that they connect destinations like work, restaurants, LRT, enough said. But anyways, I thought I'd give the rest of the council a heads up. You might get a couple of emails on this one.
Thank you, Councillor Freeman. Great to know. Did someone want to second it before we go on? Okay, Councillor Henry, and you have a comment.
Question for Chris. I am going to ask you to come up to a mic, and sorry for not asking this earlier, but I see Table 4 under Section 6, which is future sidewalk and trail possibilities. Table 4, list of locations where sidewalk or trails may be installed in the future, and then the last column in the table is resolution, and a bunch of them are basically describing why those would not have sidewalks. So I'm just trying to understand what this table's about and how it fits in the context of future trail possibilities.
Through you, Councillor Bassett, to Councillor Henry. It's really just to keep in mind that things change in the future. We have a policy that has certain criteria for sidewalks on certain streets, certain traffic volumes, etc. And for the most part, everything kind of dovetails with that. But as things move in the future, land develops, I think we still need to be aware that sometimes one of these things will actually rise and then be a valid location for a sidewalk. It could be 10 years, it could be 100 years, it could be never. But I think that was really just the thought of it, just so that somebody doesn't hold us feet to the fire in 20 years' time saying, you didn't say there was going to be a sidewalk on there, so we didn't assume, and circumstances change. I think it's just trying to cover our bases, really.
And through you, Chair Vasic, on behalf of Ward 7, I would just really like to thank your department for being so good at listening to residents and taking into perspective the utility of the sidewalks that you are putting in. So for background, a sidewalk on proposed for Stanley, which I'm a big proponent for sidewalks. I want them to be everywhere, but you've given priority to sidewalks that really have a very strong case for usage and demand. So the fact that you're putting one on Dawson where there is none, but there are lots of families and schools nearby, is fantastic. So thank you very much for that.
Through you, Chair Bassick. I'm just curious on regional roads, what the I guess how we prioritize on regional roads, and whether or not that's our authority or the region's authority, and whether we always wait for the region to do road improvements before we put sidewalks. And in particular, I'm thinking on Herbsville between Columbia and Laurelwood, where there is no sidewalk on the one side of the road, while there are actually bus stops on that side, on the side of the road that I don't know how people get to them, frankly. So just curious.
Through you, Councillor Bassett, and to Councillor Bodelli, is the regional roads are their jurisdiction. Typically, they will put sidewalk infrastructure on at time of the capital reconstruction of a road, and then in the future, the city kind of own and operate that infrastructure. But to my knowledge, we have never use city dollars to put a sidewalk on a existing regional road.
Okay, I will call the vote to receive this report as information. All in favor? All right, everyone. All right, next up, formal public meetings. We have no formal public meeting or informal public meeting. No consideration of notice of motion given at a previous meeting. Next item is a notice of motion, which has been circulated, and I'll turn it over to Mayor Jaworski from here.
Thank you, Chair. I guess first up, this is all about the bylaw enforcement issues, particularly with respect to unsanctioned public gatherings, and it would be ideal if somebody would be so kind as to waive notice of motion so that I could deliver this.
Councillor Reith, Councillor Haydenmar.
Wonderful, thank you. So in light of the fact that these unsanctioned public gatherings, number one, cost a lot of money and cause a lot of trouble, we looked at the 2018 numbers with respect to fines, and I think what we found of the outstanding fines, nearly all of them are bylaw fines, not the police fines. So people seem to pay those because they go on their driver's license. We have accurate information, and at the lower level, we're not allowed to ask for that identification. That's something we'd like to get, so we could do a better collection of fines and also potentially put them on driver's license. When I did have the ability to speak with the mayors at the Mayors Forum 3 Fridays ago, this is an issue for all municipalities and having uncollected bylaw fines, and this would give better teeth for that. So the motion goes as follows: that the Council of the Corporation of City of Waterloo calls on the Premier of Ontario and the appropriate ministries to engage municipalities in a discussion aimed at legislative initiatives that will include, but not be limited to, A, allowing for municipal law enforcement officers to require identification from individuals as part of their investigative processes, and B, allowing for municipalities to increase penalties for municipal bylaw violations that are associated with events or occurrences that pose a higher degree of risk to public safety, and C, providing for increased ability to collect defaulted fines resulting from municipal bylaw violations, which shall include, but not be limited to, the ability to apply a defaulted fine against a person's driver's license. And then finally, that we forward a copy of this resolution to a number of interested parties. Just on B, the ability to increase fines for special events, that falls in the footsteps of Uber with surge pricing. So that on certain days where we might have a bylaw set fine that's set by the province for us, we might want to double it on a certain date. And we're looking for the ability to have the discussion to do that under some certain, whatever jurisdiction we can have. So I'd like to move that recommendation.
Great.
Motion.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. First, could we vote on the motion to waive the what? No, we didn't vote. I did the first mover and firster and seconder. Yeah, so could we vote on waiving the motion? Oh, sorry, all in favor, yeah, okay, good. Losing steam here. Okay, so can I have a mover for the motion that Mayor George Scrooge? You moved it, could I have a seconder? Okay, yeah, okay, Councillor Hanmer.
Through you, Chair Vasic. I think this is a strong resolution. I have concern with one clause in particular, and that is allowing bylaw officers to require identification as part of their investigative processes. I have a concern that this could open the door to things like carding. So could we clarify that so that they could require identification from individuals when a charge is being laid?
I see an expert coming to the staff desk here.
Through you, Councillor Vasic. Obviously, the start of this process is just a discussion. I can tell you that there are already pieces of legislation in place that govern our processes that focus on the investigative process. So what I would suggest is, if there's going to be any alteration to the motion, which I'm not exactly sure is needed right at this moment, what I would suggest that it focus on the investigative process and not just simply for laying charges, because quite frankly, there are many times when we'll do an investigation and end up not laying a charge. The key piece, which I believe you're concerned about, and certainly the optics in this day and age around collecting people's personal information, is that it is, first of all, only collected for the appropriate reasons, and only shared with as part of the investigative process. So I think that I think referring to the investigative process versus just laying charges would be a better route to take. But I can certainly tell you that there will be a lot more discussion taking place before we ever get to the point of ever seeing any legislation.
If we could just make sure that those concerns are part of that conversation, just to make sure that we do close that door on that possibility, then I would be happy with that.
Absolutely. Through you, Councillor Vasic, I can tell you absolutely that will be part of the conversation. Certainly, if we're fortunate enough to get a conversation with the province, I can tell you that will be foremost in their mind, and we would completely support that approach.
Excellent. Thank you.
I was waiting for some direction. Through you, Chair Vasic. My question is also around 1A, and sort of understanding. I understand the Ezra Street implications and why we want to do that here, but I guess I'm mildly concerned about the implications just broadly with respect to bylaw asking people for driver's license, and the level of I guess sort of conflict that imputes, as opposed to just normally bringing somebody a ticket. And I wonder whether or not there is any training or any additional resources that bylaw would require should this go into effect, to make sure that we're handling those situations with care, I guess.
Through you, Councillor Vasic, I can first say that these enhanced tools, if they ever come to fruition, would be used in other situations. It's not just a St. Patrick's Day or unsanctioned gathering type of a tool. In terms of actual additional resources, I don't see additional resources being needed, but I can certainly tell you that training would be foremost in our minds. The ability to ask for identification is something that many law enforcement officials have right now, and certainly there is legislation that speaks to how they conduct themselves, but also training that's available. So we would certainly tap into that. So training's very important to us, whether it's refresher training or responding to legislative requirements. So, So I don't see an increase in resources, but certainly outside of perhaps having to pay for training, but we have a training budget that should cover that. But certainly it's a very very relevant point that will absolutely be part of our process.
Yeah, sorry, through you, Chair Vasek. I just wanted to be clear that just because we can ask for a driver's license doesn't necessarily mean that we always should be asking for a driver's license for every bylaw infraction necessarily, depending on what it is. And so I would be interested, understanding that this motion is just to bring forward the discussion. I'm in favor of it from that perspective, but I'm slightly concerned about the unintended consequences here potentially with giving this additional power to bylaw officers. So I'll just leave it at that, I guess.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Vasek. My questions have been answered as well because they dealt with the unintended consequences. And I do appreciate that this is just to get the conversation going, and that all of the parameters around protecting privacy and who the information is shared with all have to be upheld with, as well as the training. So I'm good.
Yeah, I'm going to add to that because I think this is the most important point of. I also support having a conversation about it, but I can't foresee. I love all the other ones, B to whatever the last letter was, but I don't think that I can foresee a moment in time where I would support A, though I know we need to find out who is doing the infraction in order to follow up, and so This is century-old structural oppression based on race and often socioeconomic status, and no training in the world is probably going to address it in a short period of time. And so I just want to be so clear about that one. That one worries me so much, even though I like the other ones.
Well, I would say that A is sort of instrumental in all of this, because that feeds into C and the ability to collect the fines that we're not getting. It's unfortunate that people are coming to our community, and we're fining them for coming to our community and causing problems in our community, but we don't actually know who they are. And so that's a real problem that exists today. And I would say there's a certain date, March 17th, that really impacts us, and it is instrumental to the whole thing working, though.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Councillor Beath.
Sorry, through you, Chair Vasek. So we're really talking about that one main event in this, because what came to mind when I read this was some neighborhoods have street parties, and I think mostly they're probably not sanctioned, and I can't imagine a bylaw officer showing up at a neighborhood street party, and I guess if there was some crazy thing going on, but does this open the door to more, more. Let it not have encouraging neighborliness or neighborhood events and activities. So just question.
Through you, Chair Vasek, perhaps the best way to illustrate this is that it's very similar to a level of authority that we've had for many years, going back to the 80s when I first started in this field, and that is we have the ability to enter onto somebody's private property without the owner's consent. We have to do it in a reasonable fashion, but it's also tied specifically to exercising our authority for the purposes of determining if a bylaw has been violated. So it is in no way random. We must justify that we are there for a particular purpose. And that's a level of authority, regardless of, in very simple terms, if the owner doesn't want us there, it really doesn't matter, although officer safety is a big piece of it. So that's a level of authority that we've had for many years that really some people could argue is an infringement on their Charter of Rights. The key piece is making sure that we align with the legislation to make sure that we are doing it for a justifiable purpose. I see this as being no different, that the legislation, I can envision what the legislation could look like. And would be happy to draft it if the province asks, but that's a different issue. Any requirement or any level of authority for us to do something in engaging an individual would be purely for the purposes of determining a bylaw violation. There would be no situation where we would ever want to or express our authority to simply go on what some people have called karting to be a fishing expedition in the past. So it's very much like levels of authority that we already have.
Thanks, Ms. Shane Turner. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry if I just have another comment through you, Chair Vasic. So given that 1B seems to be tied to parameters, it's saying with events or occurrences that pose a higher degree of risk, obviously there'll be some kind of parameter there. Could we attach those parameters to A and say, by law, like give by law the option of requiring identification in certain situations or scenarios? I'm just putting that to the council as something that, again, we're going way too deep right now because this may not even go anywhere, but that would make me feel more comfortable.
Thanks, Councillor Monaguer. I also was wondering if we could put it in consultation with someone who's an expert around karting, perhaps. Is that possible to say with A, like in consultation with?
Yeah, through you, Chair Vasic, I think what we could do is say in consultation with law enforcement officials, representatives from the province. Certainly, the whole issue around karting and profiling was something that was driven from the province through an inquiry or through a task force that was coordinated by the Ministry of the Attorney General. So. I'm just trying to think of the right terminology to use in terms of consulting, but really at this point, I think it'd be very difficult to name a particular entity, given the fact that the province is going to dictate this process right from start to finish.
Councillor Handmer, and
I do think that's an important part of it. That this is again to start the conversation. I think that all of us agree that there'll be unintended there could be unintended consequences that need to be reviewed. But this is literally let's start the conversation, because right now there is no conversation. People aren't paying their bylaw fines, and we're looking to collect those as a community, because our bylaws don't have the teeth, as we heard from the strategic planning session, in terms of what can we fix if we were able to fix snow clearing on our roads, or on our sidewalks. I think that's one of the things that sometimes the bylaw opportunities simply don't have enough teeth. This gives us more teeth, particularly on those days. And I think that's a great conversation around here. But hopefully that would be something that would, if we're selected to have a further conversation on this, that would definitely be part of it.
Thanks. Councillor Handmer.
Through you, Chair Vasic, just a suggestion. I think what you're hearing from council is to have some experts and specialists involved. So I'm wondering if we can add to number 1, be it resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the City of Waterloo calls on the Premier of Ontario and the appropriate ministries to engage municipalities and appropriate experts in a discussion aimed at, because there will be a level of expertise in each one of the A, B, and C. So rather than name what it's going to be, just get that. I think that might get at the essence of what we're trying to say.
To confirm, I think you said we're really adding the words to engage municipalities and
appropriate specialists or experts.
Legal experts, sorry, through Chair Vasic, probably legal experts might be the... Oh.
Yeah, so 3 words.
I don't know if it's just legal experts, sorry, because
okay,
it could be behavioral specialists, it could be privacy experts, and definitely legal experts. So I think broaden it somehow.
So did you say appropriate experts?
One, but I think the mayor has
well, this is on the other part, so we'll see.
Councillor, did you have something, Mayor Jaworski?
Pardon me?
Did you want to?
I think that's a good. Those 3 words are a good addition. And again, I think let's go back to the basics here. It is about to start a discussion. It's start a discussion. We're already starting it, but it's to start a discussion. So I think we're all in agreement that we'd like to start a discussion on this.
Definitely. Councillor Bodley.
I have a question, maybe, and then a comment vis-a-vis the discussion aspect of it. What percentage of bylaws get paid when we know where they live, i.e. sidewalk clearing and maintenance, versus bylaws when we don't know where they live, i.e. public drinking? Do we have any information on that?
Through you, Chair Vasic, I don't have, I can't quote a number, but I can tell you anecdotally that bylaw violations that are associated with a property, I mean, we know who the person is because we know the property owner, and oftentimes we have the ability to do the work and bill it to their taxes and stuff. Or we can make a claim against their house or put a lien on their property if there's a large significant fine. That's not really the issue. It's the other piece. And I would say that I feel confident I can say the majority of bylaw fines that are associated with behavioral issues that aren't associated with the property are the ones that remain unpaid. That is certainly a piece of information that would be beneficial to us as we start a discussion that we hope we have. So that's certainly something that I'll drill into. But anecdotally, I'm positive that the behavioral stuff remains unpaid far more than the property maintenance issues do.
So appreciate that, and through you, Chair Vasic, I'd just say, just to the mayor's point, I certainly appreciate and understand why 1A and 1C are in there in order to give us the teeth necessary to really impose on some, particularly around some of these big events that are occurring. And I think the conversation we're having around the horseshoe here today really speaks to what we were talking about earlier with the unsanctioned task force in terms of how difficult some of these there's no simple solution to all these things, and we have to be very wary of anybody who's coming out here and saying this is the answer, because there's going to be a lot of things that we need to consider. So I would be supportive of the revised motion for discussion, although I would say that along with Chair Vasic, noting that bylaw is part of our strategic plan, another emerging theme was inclusion, and I'd be very concerned about how this touches on that. So
All right, it sounds like I'm so glad we had this conversation. Thank you for indulging it. So, and for the addition. This is very important stuff. So it sounds like we're ready to call a vote. Yeah, we have had the mover, seconder. Okay, all in favor of the discussion? That's everyone. Great. Okay, so the next one is a more fun one. Well, that was fun too, but an easier one from Mayor Jaworski for communications and correspondence for National Health and Fitness Day. Over to you.
So wonderful that we now have a senator locally. We hadn't had one, I think, in 50 years. And so Marty Deacon she was part of the group that was going for the Canada Summer Games, trying to bring them to Waterloo region. She was leading in that. So now what she'd like to do is she'd ask for support from us and for other municipalities to have a National Health and Fitness Day. And so what she's asking for is support from our council to indicate that she has a good idea. So I'm looking forward to moving that motion to say, yes, she has a good idea, promoting health and fitness across the nation.
Who wants to second it? Councillor Freeman. All in favor? Or discussion, sorry. It looks like Councillor Henry.
I just wanted to clarify, because in the therefore there's two different things, one that's optional, one that's proclaimed. I don't recall us doing proclamations. So I just wanted to get clarity that voting in favor of this wouldn't be contrary to council approved policy.
That's correct. Through the chair to Councillor Henry, I believe that the intent is to support the senators in the federal proclamation of the day versus a municipal proclamation.
Yeah.
Through you, Chair Vasic, if I could just make a comment. Should we choose to support it, I would like to actually supplement it with some kind of free family activity or something, make use of it here, because I don't know about everyone else, but personally, I know that it's important, like health and fitness is important, but actually doing it is the challenge. So if we could do more than just, if we're going to do it, let's do more than just words. Maybe free programming at the community centre that day or something like that could be a fun way to make it a little bit easier to just go beyond making me feel guilty.
Well, at this point in time, she's only asking us to support her notion of it. So until she proclaims it in 2020 or 2023, I think we still have time on our side.
Councillor Freeman, did you have a question, comment? Okay, all in favor of supporting this? That's everyone. All right, next up, regional information and correspondence. There's none. Unfinished business. I don't think there is any. New business, no delegations, no consent motions, no staff reports. Councillor Freeman, has other business to share with us.
Thank you, through Chair Vasic. I just wanted to give people a quick update on the Climate Change Champions program. It's really, I think it's just so new. FCM's never done this before, so you got 4 new people with all new staff on an all new program. And the program's funded by the federal government. So the last Monday, Tuesday, FCM brought together the implementing partners from their, I hate the acronyms, Municipal Climate Implementation Program or Investment Program. It's MSIP. And the Climate Change Champions kind of opened that day. And it was really interesting to see the questions that these climate change partners were asking. So these are individuals who are implementing climate change initiatives across Canada. And I just wanted to give you a heads up. It's 103 communities, 1 First Nations, 3.1 million, and 15 projects that will be implemented over the next year. And within that granting envelope, locally here, Climate Action Waterloo Region was one. So of all those grants, 13 are dedicated towards climate change mitigation, so helping people understand things they can do to mitigate climate change. And 15 of the programs were related to adaptation and resilience and building resiliency within communities. So a couple of things that really stood out for me when I was there is that Waterloo Region is a real leader more broadly in the country as it relates to partners in climate change and in partners in climate protection. So when FCM first started their program back in the early 90s, Waterloo was one of the very first adopters into the program. And so you can see from our climate change action, our climate action Waterloo Region, that we're really far ahead in terms of where we're headed as a municipality, and the fact that all the townships have come in too, it's really tremendous. So I think we kind of look like rock stars there. I think REAP did a really great job representing the region. And some things that I heard that really were heartening. So, you know, there was staff from Infrastructure Canada who were willing to articulate that they believe municipalities are best positioned to actually deliver on the federal government's commitments to 50% by 2050. And I think it's really important to have staff actually be willing to say those things and to say that they see the municipal agenda as the #1 tool that they can achieve some of these international goals that they've set out. I think one of the other things that I thought was really fascinating was they basically are building a capacity network map for all of Canada. And that's looking at all of the different projects that have happened and are happening across Canada related to resilience and mitigation. And it's really exciting. And a couple of things that really stood out for me that might be important for the city of Waterloo. There is an organization that's doing energy poverty mapping. And so apparently the United Nations definition of energy poverty is that if I think the number's 9% of your annual income goes to paying for energy, you're considered energy poor. And they're starting to do that for municipalities across Canada. And I think that could be a really interesting information, because they've, my gut instinct is there's many pockets within the city of Waterloo where we have a sense that people are maybe struggling, but it's not visually apparent either by the accommodation they live in or the neighborhood that they reside in, but they may indeed be energy poor. And once you map that, you can see alignment with some of the other social indicators around mental health and isolation and all of those kinds of things. So I thought it was very interesting. Some municipalities are trying to find partners to do demonstrations of green building. And so, we've got Evolve One here, which is super exciting, but some municipalities are actually partnering with some faith groups, because I guess the Pope passed an edict or whatever a year ago around climate change and being stewards of the environment. And so there's a lot of faith communities that are looking to use their buildings as future community centers, and then taking an investment to be demonstration sites for green technology. And I thought that was really interesting. Moving forward, a bunch of stuff has kind of come on my plate. I don't know how I was so lucky. The other champions didn't seem to get quite so many emails, but I've been asked to write an article for the Public Sector Digest on the climate change. I'm going to be looking to staff for help with that. And later this month, I'm attending a Canadian Academy of Engineering Green Building Symposium alongside FCM. And that is very interesting because they're starting to unpack the role that cities can play in the whole green building envelope. And so I'm creating slides. I'm going to work with FCM on that as well. But it's very interesting because if you start wrapping your head around this, like something like a green neighborhood that has redundancy built into it for energy. So if everything's 100% renewable, right, and you don't get sunlight for 5 days, you've got to have batteries, you have to have backup, you have to have something somewhere, right? Well, who's going to own that? Are we going to own that? Right? Is it owned by the subdivision, the houses in the subdivision? I don't know. But I think it's a really interesting question. And I've worked with Wendy Fisher in our planning department too, to get ideas of what tools do we have, like through our OP, through bylaws, through other things where it's not just incenting green development, but it's expecting it. And so anyways, I'm doing my best to represent all of you as I do this, and but it's very interesting. It's I think there's lots of lessons to bring back here, and I appreciate the opportunity to give feedback on it.
Thanks, Councillor Freeman. That's so exciting. I think you're probably doing an amazing job representing us. Yeah. Does anyone want to comment on that presentation? All right. Yeah. Great. Okay. Any other questions? Motion to adjourn. Do I do that first or after? Yeah. Okay. Councillor Freeman, Councillor Bodley. All in favor? That was fun.